The observation room of Station DN 789 was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. Senior researcher Du Jin stood at the main viewport, his four eyes fixed on the swirling storms of the deadly planet below. His thin, gray fingers tapped nervously on the reinforced glass as he watched yet another day pass on this impossible world. Director Nadung, a voice called out suddenly, breaking the silence. "We have detected an unknown object entering the atmosphere." The station director rushed to the monitoring station, her silvery robes flowing behind her. Research assistant Jaiho's hands moved quickly over the holographic controls, bringing up detailed scans of the object. "It appears to be..." Jaiho's voice trailed off in disbelief. "It's an escape pod, and there are life signs inside." Du Jin moved closer to the screen. Impossible. Nothing could survive entry through those storms. The atmospheric acid alone would. A bright flash on the main screen interrupted him. The escape pod had broken through the cloud layer, its heat shields glowing red against the greenish sky. Despite the planet's crushing gravity and hostile conditions, the pod was maintaining a controlled descent. "Track its trajectory," Nayoung ordered, her professional calm masking her growing concern, "and identify its origin immediately." Jaiho worked quickly, his fingers dancing over the controls. "The pod's design. It's from Earth. A human vessel." The room fell silent. Everyone knew about humans, the Deathworlders who had recently joined the galactic community. Their home planet was considered barely habitable by galactic standards, yet they had thrived there. Still, DN 789 was far worse than Earth. The gravity was 1.8 times stronger. The atmosphere was highly acidic, and the local wildlife made Earth's most dangerous predators look tame in comparison. "I'm picking up the pod's identification," Jaiho announced. "It's registered to Chief Engineer Hansol of the Earth merchant vessel, Resilient. The ship itself is not in our scanning range." Nayoung activated the station's emergency protocols. "Contact the nearest rescue vessels. We need tow." Director Du Jin interrupted, pointing at the main screen. "Look." The escape pod had landed in a relatively flat area, protected by a large rock formation. As they watched, the pod's hatch began to open. "They can't be serious," Security Officer Mirai whispered. "No one would attempt to exit in these conditions. The atmospheric pressure alone." A figure emerged from the pod. The human was wearing what appeared to be standard Earth emergency gear, nothing like the sophisticated environmental suits the station's crew would use to survive on the surface. Yet Hansol moved with purpose, seemingly unbothered by the crushing gravity. The observation room erupted with activity. Research teams scrambled to record everything, their instruments tracking the human's vital signs, movement patterns, and environmental interactions. The data they were receiving seemed to defy their understanding of biology. "Look at those readings," Chief Xenobiologist Suho said, his voice filled with academic excitement. "The human's heart rate is elevated but stable. Muscle stress is within sustainable ranges. How is this possible?" They watched as Hansol surveyed the surrounding area, using basic tools to test the wind direction and soil composition. The human's movements were efficient and calculated, showing none of the panic typically seen in crash survivors. Director Mirai called out, "I'm detecting movement in Sector 7, approximately 3 kilometers from the landing site." She adjusted her screens, revealing thermal images of massive shapes moving through the toxic undergrowth. Local predators. They must have detected the landing. Nayoung faced a difficult decision. Their station was primarily for research, not rescue operations. Their small shuttle was not designed for the planet's conditions, and the nearest rescue vessel was at least 4 days away. Protocol dictated they should wait for proper emergency services. But as she watched the human begin to unload survival equipment from the pod, she realized this might be their only chance to study how a Deathworlder handled true survival situations. "Maintain continuous observation," she ordered. "Record everything. and prepare the emergency shuttle, just in case. The next few hours were unlike anything the research team had ever seen. Hansol worked methodically, salvaging materials from the escape pod and gathering resources from the surrounding area. The humans seemed to instinctively understand which local rocks would resist the acidic rain and which naturally formed caves would offer the best protection. Fascinating, Suho muttered, taking notes. The human is using techniques that seem primitive, yet they're perfectly adapted to these conditions. Look at how they're testing materials by exposing them to different levels of atmospheric exposure. It's systematic, scientific even. As the planet's weak sun began to set, Hansol had already established a basic shelter using a combination of escape pod materials and local resources. The entrance was positioned to minimize exposure to the prevailing winds, and a crude but effective filtration system was already processing the toxic air. "Director," Jiho called out, his voice urgent. "The predators are getting closer." Two large groups converging on the landing site. The research team watched anxiously as Hansol worked quickly to reinforce the shelter's defenses. The human had somehow already identified the local predators' hunting patterns and was using the natural terrain to create bottlenecks and barriers. "Send a message to the Galactic Research Council," Naeyoung decided. "Tell them we have an unprecedented opportunity to study Deathworlder survival techniques, and contact Earth's emergency services. They should know one of their people is about to give us all a lesson in survival." As the station's artificial night cycle began, the research team continued their observation in shifts. None of them wanted to miss a moment of what was unfolding below. They had come to DN 789 to study one of the galaxy's most hostile environments, but now they found themselves studying something even more interesting: a human's ability to adapt and survive in conditions that their own civilization had deemed impossible. Du-Jin remained at his post long after his shift had ended, watching as Hansol secured the shelter for the night. "Director," he said quietly, "I believe we're about to witness something that will change our understanding of species classification forever." Naeyoung nodded, her eyes fixed on the monitoring screens. "Indeed, and something tells me this is only the beginning." Below them, in the growing darkness of DN 789, Hansol checked the shelter's seals one final time before settling in for the night. The human had survived the first day in a place where survival should have been impossible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, the research team could only watch and wonder what other surprises their unexpected subject would reveal. The predators circling in the distance seemed to wonder the same thing, their massive forms visible on the thermal scanners as they tested the boundaries of this strange new creature's territory. But Hansol slept soundly in the reinforced shelter, ready to face whatever challenges the deadly world would bring with the dawn. The acid rain fell in sheets as dawn broke over DN 789. In the observation station above, the night shift was ending their watch when Hansol emerged from the shelter. The humans' movements were careful but confident, despite the harsh conditions that had only grown worse overnight. "How are the vital signs?" Director Naeyoung asked as she entered the monitoring room, her silver robes now wrinkled from a short night's rest. Research assistant Jiho checked the readings. "Stable. The human's heart rate and blood pressure are normal. Even more surprising, there are signs of proper rest cycles. Hansol actually slept through the night." Slept. Senior researcher Du-Jin moved closer to the screens. "In these conditions, with apex predators nearby." Security officer Mireille pointed to her thermal scans. "Speaking of predators, they're still there. 3 large groups now, watching the shelter. But they haven't approached closer than 2 kilometers." The research team watched as Hansol began the morning's work. The human first checked all the shelter's seals and supports, making small repairs where the acid rain had begun to eat away at less protected materials. Then, using pieces of the escape pod's outer shell, Hansol began to construct something new. "What is that?" Suho asked, leaning forward to study the construction. "It looks like some kind of collection system." They watched as Hansol set up a series of angled panels that caught the acid rain and directed it into a filtered container. The human then added layers of local minerals, the same ones that had proven resistant to the corrosive atmosphere. Of course, lead engineer Ta-1 exclaimed, "The human is making a water purification system. Those minerals naturally neutralize the acid. It's so simple, yet so effective." Na-Young made notes in her report to the Galactic Research Council. Observe how the human is using basic physics and chemistry principles with readily available materials. No advanced technology, yet the results are undeniable. As the morning progressed, Hansol's activities became even more interesting. The human began to venture further from the shelter, always moving in a careful pattern that kept escape routes open. Each expedition brought back more materials, certain rocks that could be shaped into tools, fibrous plants that proved surprisingly resistant to the acid, and even some local fungal growths that Hansol carefully tested before collecting. "Look at this," Jaiho called out, excitement in his voice. "The human is creating a map." The screen showed Hansol marking the ground near the shelter, using different colored rocks to indicate what appeared to be safe zones, danger areas, and resource locations. "Remarkable," Du Jin said, "not just surviving, but establishing a sustainable presence, and all without any of our advanced technology." The afternoon brought new challenges. One of the predator groups finally decided to test the humans' defenses. The creatures were massive, silicon-based life forms with crystalline armor that usually made them invulnerable to attack. The research team watched tensely as 3 of them approached the shelter. But Hansol was ready. The human had created a series of trenches around the shelter, barely visible under the toxic mist. As the first predator approached, it stumbled into one of these trenches. The creature's weight worked against it, and it found itself trapped. "Incredible," Mayray breathed. "The human used their own size against them. In this gravity, they're too heavy to easily climb out." The other predators backed away, but Hansol wasn't finished. Using a long pole made from escape pod materials, the human carefully placed something near the trapped creature. The research team zoomed in their cameras to see what appeared to be a package of emergency rations. "What is the human doing?" Na-Young asked, puzzled. Surely not trying to feed it. They got their answer soon enough. The predator's crystalline armor began to react with whatever was in the ration pack, creating a strange resonance that clearly disturbed the creature. After several uncomfortable minutes, the predator managed to scramble out of the trench and retreated quickly, with its companions following. "Chemical warfare," Suho said with admiration. "The human must have analyzed the creature's silicon-based biology and found a substance that would make them uncomfortable without causing permanent harm. A warning rather than a lethal defense." The rest of the day was spent reinforcing the shelter and expanding the water collection system. Hansol had begun to create what looked like a small greenhouse using transparent panels from the escape pod, carefully treating the soil inside with filtered water and collected minerals. Director Ta-1 called out late in the afternoon. "I've analyzed the humans' construction methods. They're not just building randomly. Every addition serves multiple purposes. The greenhouse panels can be quickly converted into additional shelter space. The water filtration system doubles as a defensive barrier. Even the mapping stones can be used as tools if needed." Na-Young nodded, adding to her report. "The human demonstrates not just survival skills, but an innate understanding of resource optimization and tactical planning. This goes beyond mere endurance of harsh conditions." As the sun set on the second day, Hansol had accomplished what the research team had believed impossible. The simple shelter was becoming a functional base, with systems for water collection, food production, and defense. The human had turned the planet's deadly features into advantages, using the acid rain for water, the toxic plants for resources, and the high gravity for protection against predators. "The rescue ship is still 3 days away," Jaiho reminded them. "Should we be concerned?" Do Jin shook his head, his 4 eyes showing what might have been amusement. I think we should be more concerned about what other preconceptions this human will shatter in the next 3 days. In the shelter below, Hansol was already preparing for the next day, organizing collected materials and checking the new additions to the base. The human seemed completely at peace in this deadly environment, as if the impossible challenge of survival on DN 789 was just another engineering problem to be solved. The research team continued their observations through the night, their reports to the Galactic Research Council growing longer with each passing hour. They had come to study a deadly world, but instead they were learning that perhaps their definition of deadly needed to be reconsidered. With simple tools and basic principles, a human was not just surviving but beginning to thrive in conditions that their most advanced environmental suits could barely handle. As the night deepened, the predators kept their distance, perhaps learning a new respect for the strange creature that had turned their hunting ground into a fortress. In the observation station above, the alien researchers continued to watch, wonder, and learn from their unexpected teacher on the deadly world below. The third day on DN 789 started with an ominous silence. The constant acid rain had stopped, and the toxic mists had temporarily cleared. In the observation station, Security Officer Myre was the first to notice the change in predator behavior. Director Na-young, she called out, her voice tense. The crystal beasts are moving. All of them. At once. The main screen showed thermal images of dozens of massive shapes converging on Hansol's shelter. The silicon-based predators had apparently decided that their territory had been invaded for too long. Their crystalline bodies reflected the weak sunlight as they moved through the clearing mists. How many? Na-young asked, her professional calm slipping slightly. 27 distinct signatures, Myre reported. The largest group we've ever recorded moving together. In the shelter below, Hansol was already awake and alert. The human stood at the entrance, studying the surrounding area with a homemade periscope crafted from escape pod materials. The research team watched as Hansol quickly began final preparations for what was clearly going to be a serious confrontation. Fascinating, Chief Xenobiologist Suho said, recording every detail. The human is using the brief break in the weather to strengthen the defenses. Look at how they're repositioning those mineral deposits. Hansol had indeed begun moving piles of processed minerals into new positions around the shelter. Each pile was carefully placed and shaped, creating what looked like a maze of barriers and channels. I don't understand, Research Assistant Jeho said. Those mineral piles won't stop the crystal beasts. They can easily push through them. Senior researcher Du Jin studied the pattern carefully. I don't think stopping them is the goal. Look at the layout. It's almost like a processing plant. Lead engineer Ta-won finished the thought. The human is creating a chemical processing system. But why now? When an attack is coming. They got their answer within the hour. The crystal beasts began their approach, moving with surprising coordination for such large creatures. The first wave reached the outer ring of Hansol's defenses just as the acid rain began to fall again. What happened next left the entire research team speechless. The mineral piles, when exposed to the acid rain, began to create exactly the same resonance effect that Hansol had tested the day before with the emergency rations. But this time, the effect was massive. The entire area around the shelter became a zone of uncomfortable vibrations for the silicon-based creatures. The human weaponized the planet's own hostile environment, Myre said with professional admiration. The acid rain activates the minerals, creating a defensive barrier that doesn't require any active maintenance. But the crystal beasts were not so easily deterred this time. Though clearly uncomfortable, they pressed forward. That's when Hansol revealed the second part of the defense strategy. The human had modified the water collection system to concentrate and direct the acid rain. Using a series of gutters and tubes made from escape pod materials, Hansol could now spray concentrated acid at specific targets. When this hit the crystal beast's armor, it created an even stronger resonance than the mineral piles. Look at the precision, Ta-won noted. The human isn't trying to harm them permanently, just making it too uncomfortable for them to continue their attack. The crystal beasts fell into confusion. Their coordinated attack broke down as individual creatures retreated from the unpleasant sensations, but three of the largest ones pressed forward, seemingly determined to reach the shelter. Hansol was ready for them too. The human had prepared special packages, similar to the ones used the day before but larger. These were launched from a simple catapult made of salvaged materials, delivering their payload with surprising accuracy. Chemical analysis coming in, Suho reported, checking his instruments. The packages contain a mixture of processed minerals and emergency ration components. When combined with the acid rain, they create a much stronger resonance effect. It's like an enhanced version of yesterday's defense. The remaining crystal beasts finally retreated, leaving the area around the shelter clear. The research team watched in amazement as Hansol immediately began collecting samples from where the creatures had stood, apparently studying the effect of different mineral combinations on their crystalline armor. "This is remarkable," Ne-Young said, updating her report to the Galactic Research Council. The human not only survived a coordinated attack from apex predators, but used the encounter as an opportunity to gather more data. There's a level of strategic thinking here that goes beyond mere survival instinct. The rest of the day was spent reinforcing the new defense system. Hansol expanded the mineral processing area and created several backup water direction systems. The human also began work on what appeared to be a more permanent structure within the original shelter. "The rescue ship will arrive tomorrow," Jaiho reminded everyone. "Should we send them a message about what to expect?" Dojin shook his head. "Let them see it for themselves. Sometimes seeing is the only way to believe." As night fell, the research team noticed something extraordinary. The crystal beasts had established a new perimeter, much further from the shelter than before. They were still watching, but their behavior had changed. Instead of preparing for another attack, they seemed to be studying the humans' activities. "They're learning," Suho said quietly, "just as we are. This human has changed the entire ecological dynamic of this region in just 3 days." In the shelter below, Hansol continued working well into the night, using the bioluminescent fungi collected earlier to provide light. The humans seemed completely absorbed in analyzing the day's samples and planning further improvements to the vase. Director Mayray said, checking her long-range scans, "I'm detecting more crystal beasts approaching the area. But their movement patterns are different. They're not in attack formation. They appear to be observing." Ne-Young smiled. "It seems we're not the only ones studying this situation. Life, even silicon-based life, recognizes and adapts to superior survival strategies when it encounters them." The night passed quietly, with both the alien researchers and the crystal beasts watching as Hansol transformed a simple survival shelter into something that was beginning to look more like a research station of its own. The human had not just survived on DN 789. They had begun to understand it, adapt to it, and even use its deadly nature to their advantage. In the observation station above, the research team continued their documentation, knowing that tomorrow would bring rescue, but also knowing that what they had witnessed these past 3 days would change their understanding of survival, adaptation, and the classification of intelligent species forever. The fourth morning on DN 789 brought unexpected developments. The observation station's team arrived for their morning shift to find Chief Xenobiologist Suho already at his post, staring intently at the monitoring screens. "You need to see this," he said as Director Ne-Young entered the room. "The human has made an extraordinary discovery." The main screen showed Hansol carefully approaching one of the crystal beasts, but unlike the previous encounters, this one was different. The massive creature stood still, its crystalline surface reflecting the dim morning light. More surprisingly, it had placed several glowing fungi at Hansol's previous mineral markers. "It appears to be an offering," Suho explained. "These fungi are different from the ones the human has been collecting. They grow deeper in the crystal beast territory, in areas too dangerous for most life forms to reach. Nayum moved closer to the screen. Are you suggesting that the predators are attempting communication? Watch, Suho said simply. Hansol picked up one of the fungi samples and examined it carefully. The human then reached into a pouch and pulled out some of the processed minerals from yesterday's defense system. With slow, deliberate movements, Hansol placed the minerals near the crystal beast. Remarkable, senior researcher Du Jin said as he joined them at the monitors. The human understood that yesterday's encounter wasn't just about territory. It was a test of intelligence. The crystal beast moved forward slowly and touched the minerals with one of its crystalline appendages. The contact created a soft resonance, different from the defensive frequencies of the day before. The creature then stepped back and seemed to wait. Hansol stayed still for a moment, then smiled. The human began to adjust the mineral mixture, creating different resonance patterns. The crystal beast responded by moving its own crystalline structures, creating matching frequencies. They're establishing a basic form of communication, Security Officer Mirai observed, using resonance patterns instead of sound or light. The research team watched in amazement as Hansol spent the next few hours working with the crystal beast, learning its resonance patterns and teaching it new ones. Other crystal beasts gradually approached, each bringing different varieties of fungi or minerals from their territory. The rescue ship will be here in 10 hours, Research Assistant Jiho reminded everyone. Should we inform them about this development? Nayum shook her head. Let's continue observing. This is unprecedented interaction between silicon-based and carbon-based life forms. We need to document everything. Hansol worked tirelessly through the morning, using the new fungi samples to create an improved growth system in the greenhouse. The human had discovered that these deeper-dwelling fungi could process the toxic atmosphere more efficiently than the surface varieties. Look at how they're integrating everything, lead engineer Ta-Won pointed out. The fungi purify the air, the minerals filter the water, and the resonance patterns keep the crystal beasts informed of the human's activities. It's becoming a complete ecosystem. By midday, Hansol had established what appeared to be a regular exchange system with the crystal beasts. They would bring materials from the deeper regions of the planet, and the human would share processed minerals and filtered water. The creatures seemed particularly interested in the purified water, as it helped clean their crystalline surfaces of accumulated acid residue. This goes beyond simple survival, Du Jin said, making notes for their report. The human has established a symbiotic relationship with the local apex predators in less than 4 days. They've turned enemies into allies. The afternoon brought another surprise. Using the new fungi and some modified escape pod equipment, Hansol created a more efficient atmospheric processing system. The human had noticed that the crystal beast's resonance patterns changed when the air quality improved, and used this as a guide to perfect the filtration process. Fascinating, Suho said, analyzing the data. The human is using the crystal beasts as living environmental sensors. Their natural resonance patterns indicate atmospheric conditions more accurately than our own equipment. As the day progressed, more crystal beasts arrived, each bringing different materials. Hansol worked methodically, testing each new sample and finding ways to integrate them into the growing base. The shelter had evolved from a simple survival structure into a research station of its own. Director Mirai called out, checking her long-range scans. The rescue ship will enter orbit in 3 hours. But look at these readings from the surface. The screen showed that the crystal beasts had arranged themselves in a wide circle around Hansol's base. They were using their crystalline bodies to create a resonance barrier that deflected the worst of the acid rain and toxic winds. They're protecting the base, Ta-Won said in amazement. They've accepted the human's presence and are actively helping to maintain it. Nayum began preparing her final report to the Galactic Research Council. In 4 days, this human has not only survived on one of the deadliest known planets, but has also revolutionized our understanding of interspecies cooperation. The crystal beasts, which we thought were simply dangerous predators, have demonstrated remarkable intelligence and adaptability. The research team watched as Hansol continued working, now teaching some of the smaller crystal beasts how to assist with the fungal processing system. The human moved among these massive creatures with complete confidence, using their resonance patterns to coordinate their activities. The rescue ship will want to evacuate immediately, Jaiho said. Standard protocol for extreme environments. Dojin smiled. Somehow, I don't think this human will be leaving anytime soon. Look at what they've built here. This isn't just a survival shelter anymore. It's the beginning of something much bigger. As the day drew to a close, Hansol sat at the entrance of the base, surrounded by crystal beasts. The human was recording notes and drawing diagrams, planning future improvements and experiments. The deadly world of DN 789 had become a laboratory, and its most dangerous inhabitants had become research partners. In the observation station above, the research team prepared to welcome the rescue ship, knowing that what they had witnessed would change the galaxy's understanding of survival, adaptation, and the true nature of intelligence. They had come to study a hostile world, but instead they had seen it transformed by the power of human ingenuity and the unexpected capacity for cooperation between the most different forms of life. The rescue ship Swift Response entered DN 789's orbit just as the planet's weak sun began to rise. Captain Minki stood on his bridge, reading the observation station's reports with growing disbelief. "These reports can't be accurate," he said to his crew. "No one could have established a research base in these conditions in just 4 days." In the observation station, Director Nayoung prepared to welcome the rescue team. "Send them the latest visual feeds," she instructed research assistant Jaiho. "They need to understand what they're about to see." The main screen showed Hansol's base in the morning light. It had grown into an impressive structure, surrounded by a protective ring of crystal beasts. The toxic mists that usually covered the surface had cleared around the base, thanks to the new fungal filtration system. "Rescue ship approaching landing zone," Security Officer Mirai announced. "The crystal beasts they're moving to create a safe corridor." Indeed, the massive silicon-based creatures were shifting their positions, using their crystalline bodies to shield the landing area from acid rain and harmful winds. They moved with precise coordination, following the resonance patterns Hansol had taught them. The rescue ship landed smoothly in the cleared area. Captain Minki and his environmental team emerged wearing their most advanced protective suits. They stopped short at the sight of Hansol, who waited for them wearing only modified emergency gear and a breathing mask. "Welcome to Research Station DN 789, Hansol said through the mask's communication system. "I apologize for any worry I may have caused, but as you can see, I've been quite busy." The rescue team stood frozen, staring at the crystal beasts that surrounded them. These creatures, known throughout the galaxy as unstoppable predators, were calmly assisting a human with various tasks around the base. In the observation station above, Chief Xenobiologist Suho was recording everything. "Look at their faces," he said, zooming in on the rescue team. "This is how paradigms change, one shocked expression at a time." Hansol led the rescue team on a tour of the base. The human explained each innovation: the mineral-based water purification system, the fungal air processors, and the resonance communication network with the crystal beasts. "The fungi we discovered," Hansol explained, showing them the greenhouse, "can break down the toxic elements in the atmosphere. The crystal beasts helped me find the most effective varieties. In return, we provide them with purified water and resonance patterns that help them navigate the worst storms." Captain Minki found his voice at last. "The evacuation ship is ready. We should leave before conditions worsen." "Leave?" Hansol looked surprised. "Captain, this isn't a survival shelter anymore. It's a research station. These crystal beasts aren't just helping me survive. They're helping me understand this planet. We're making discoveries that could revolutionize hostile environment adaptation throughout the galaxy." In the observation station, Director Nayoung was already sending urgent messages to the Galactic Research Council. "We need to reconsider everything we thought we knew about hostile environments," she said as she typed. "This human has proven that with the right approach, even the deadliest worlds can become opportunities for learning and cooperation." Senior researcher Du Jin added his own notes to the report. "The crystal beasts display far more intelligence than we ever suspected. They're not just predators. They're sophisticated beings capable of learning, cooperation, and possibly even scientific curiosity. We just needed someone who could communicate with them properly." The rescue team spent hours documenting Han Sol's achievements. Lead engineer Ta Wan from the observation station joined them on the surface, eager to study the innovative systems up close. He marveled at how the human had combined simple materials and natural processes to create solutions that their advanced technology couldn't match. "These techniques could help us establish research stations on countless worlds we thought were too dangerous to explore," Ta Wan said, examining the water purification system and the crystal beast's ability to detect environmental changes through resonance patterns. "It's more accurate than our best sensors." As the day progressed, more crystal beasts arrived, bringing new materials and fungi samples. They seemed to understand that this was an important moment, and they wanted to demonstrate their full capabilities as research partners. "I'm not leaving," Han Sol announced to both the rescue team and the observation station staff. "This is just the beginning. Think about what we could learn here with proper support and equipment. These crystal beasts have knowledge of this planet that could take us decades to gather on our own." Captain Min-Ki looked uncertain. "This goes against all our protocols for extreme environments." "Perhaps." Director Nayoung's voice came through their communication systems. "It's time to rewrite those protocols. The Galactic Research Council has just authorized the establishment of a permanent research station here. They want to study not just the planet, but this unprecedented cooperation between humans and silicon-based life forms." The news energized everyone. The rescue ship was quickly repurposed into a supply vessel, bringing down equipment and materials to expand the base. The crystal beasts helped with the construction, their strength and natural resonance abilities making them perfect partners for building in the harsh conditions. "We're witnessing the birth of a new era in xenobiology and environmental adaptation," Suho said, watching the activity below. "All because one human refused to see this planet as just a hostile environment to survive." In the days that followed, more researchers arrived, eager to learn from Han Sol's methods. The human taught them how to communicate with the crystal beasts using resonance patterns, how to process the toxic atmosphere using local fungi, and how to see opportunities where others saw only dangers. The crystal beasts proved to be excellent teachers as well. They showed the researchers deep cave systems filled with unknown minerals, introduced them to new species of fungi with remarkable properties, and demonstrated complex behaviors that changed everything scientists thought they knew about silicon-based life. "It's strange," Han Sol said one evening, sitting with the research team as they watched the crystal beasts working on expanding the base. "Everyone thought I was just trying to survive here. But from the moment I landed, I saw this place differently. It wasn't about survival, it was about understanding. Every hostile element of this world could be turned into an advantage if you just took the time to learn from it." Director Nayoung's final report to the Galactic Research Council became a foundation for new protocols on exploring hostile worlds. The success on DN 789 proved that with the right approach, even the most dangerous environments could become sites of incredible discovery and cooperation. The deadly world that no one thought could support life had become home to the galaxy's most ambitious research station. And at its heart was the partnership between a human who saw possibilities instead of dangers, and a species of crystal beings who recognized the value of cooperation over conflict. As the station grew, its reputation spread throughout the galaxy. Researchers from countless worlds came to study not just the hostile environment, but the remarkable relationship between the human and crystal beast scientists. They had created something unprecedented, a place where different forms of life could work together to unlock the secrets of the universe, one resonance pattern at a time.